When I was little, a good number of my summer days were spent doing what a lot of little kids do, playing in the mud. I remember being at my friend's house. It was right on Lake Bistineau. The yard was marshy and muddy, and we would stomp around so much that we'd be completely covered in mud. Or if the summer sun got too hot, we'd pull out the garden hose, we'd cool off in it, and then we'd turn the yard into a giant, muddy slip and slide. Those were the days. And even at my own house, my sisters and I, we would fill old sour cream canisters and butter containers, you know, the original Tupperware, and we'd cook in it out in the backyard. We'd dig in the dirt and mix it with the water from the spigot, and we'd make mud pies and mud pancakes, muddy soup, and teeny tiny mud ball pasta. We had a blast. Mud. It's a simple mixture. It's ordinary, gross, fun, messy. It's just water and dirt. And in our scripture passage for today, in John chapter 9, we hear the story of where Jesus made mud. He picked up some dirt in his hands and he mixed in a little spits and he made some mud. And he put the mud on the man's eyes, the man who was born blind. And after that, he told the man to go wash in the pool, and he would receive his sight. It's a powerful story, and there's a lot packed into it. But there are a few things that really stick out to me about this passage. Like how the first thing that the disciples are concerned with is about what brought about this man's condition. They weren't thinking about how they could help him. They just wanted to know why. Isn't that just like us? Our human response to discomfort is often to ask, why? They see this man in need and they ask, why is he like this? Surely someone caused his blindness. Was it him or his parents? The disciples, they get stuck in the questions, in the wondering. But Jesus assures them that it wasn't anyone's sin that brought about this man's condition. God didn't cause the man to become blind. God certainly didn't cause his blindness so that the glory of God could be revealed through this miraculous healing. But Jesus isn't focused on cracking the theological nuances of why. Instead, Jesus refocuses the disciples, saying, let's hone in on what God is doing here. He instead focuses on what God can do in their current situation. So at a time when we're all filled with questions, when we're wondering why the coronavirus is here, what happens if some of us get sick, why certain measures are in place, why others waited so long before implementing other measures, at a time when we're stuck in the why, Jesus shifts us. He bends down and picks up the dirt, the same dirt that all of humanity was fashioned out of. Genesis offers us a beautiful story of how God formed us. It tells us God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. God took some simple soil and fashioned human beings and put in him the breath of life. Adam, therefore, was one part earth, and one part spirit. And later on, God refined some of that Adam dirt and created Eve. What started off as simple particles of dirt God molded and fashioned to become one of God's greatest creations, humankind, you and me. And so it is that God uses dirt to do miraculous things. And so in our story today, Jesus bends down and picks up that very same dirt. He adds water, adds his spit, makes mud, rubs it on the eyes of the blind man. Jesus takes the ordinary and he uses it to heal and restore. I wonder how many people that day saw a man spit on some dirt, mix some mud, and didn't think a thing about it. And yet what they really encountered was the very living water of God mixing with the dirt of creation and forming a way to bring wholeness and healing to this man's life, to our lives. Jesus reminds us that God is in the business of providing restoration through the ordinary, of providing healing through the regular and the mundane. We're all in need of healing. For some of us, it's a physical healing from chronic pain or constant trouble breathing, from cancer or recent surgery. And a few of us now are in need of healing from the coronavirus. But for others, it might not be a physical healing like the blind man. But we all have things that need God's touch. For the anxiety that comes from simply living, and especially now that we're living during a global pandemic. For the loneliness and chaos that comes from a new way of doing daily life. For the depression that sets in when things that we've really been looking forward to, vacations, birthday celebrations, just getting to hug those that we love that don't live in our home. We need God's touch. We need that healing. We need that reminder that restoration can come from mud, from the messiness, from the ordinary. I was reminded of that yesterday as Adam planted cucumbers just right over there in summer squash, and we watched the caterpillars, soon to be monarch butterflies, munch on our milkweed over in the corner that's almost disappeared because they were really, really hungry. As we took the time to feel the wind blow through our open windows, as we heard the sound of the birds, I saw new life burst forth all around us, in the buzzing of the bees and the flowers blooming. I realized that God does, in fact, bring restoration through the mud, through the messiness, through the ordinary things of life. But to be honest, there's nothing ordinary about what we're experiencing or living right now. The feelings of isolation are real, especially for the extroverts among us, but really for all of us. So when we're feeling down, I want us to remember to FaceTime a friend, to go for a walk, to marvel at the strength and simplicity of a weed that grows through the cracks in the sidewalk, to jump into a hobby that we've told ourselves we just don't have time for, to soak up family time, even if they're the ones who are driving us crazy, to listen to our favorite songs, to turn on the music, to have a spontaneous dance party, to make time to sit and marvel at the things that we just don't make time for, to recognize God's movement among us. Yesterday, I got a glimpse of God's movement and the healing new life that Jesus offers. You see, there's this little boy in our neighborhood. He lives about 5 blocks away, and he turned 4 yesterday. His mom posted on our Facebook page for our neighborhood that he was so bummed that he couldn't have a party, have his friends come over. He couldn't even go out to eat, to have his favorite meal. And clearly he's not at an age where he understands why these things can't happen. And so the neighborhood hosted a birthday parade for him. There were a line of cars. Some were decked out with decorations, other with signs, and all there to wish Linus a happy birthday. Linus loves animals. And so I filled my car with all of our stuffed animals. And as I drove by his house, he was on the porch, and each of my stuffed animals waved at him. Adam's cow, my bunny, a really big bear. I told him happy birthday. And although I'd never met Linus or his family before, I honked. And he smiled. Because it's in the little things, in the intentional pauses of our lives, that God breathes new life, that God chips away at anxiety, that God heals broken hearts and mends spirits, that God brings a smile to a 4-year-old's face. So this week, as those of us in New Orleans shelter in place, as all of us practice social distancing to protect ourselves and to keep our loved ones and our community safe and healthy, let us open our eyes to where God is moving around us. Because I believe in a God that makes beautiful things out of the dirt of life. In a God that meets us in truly awful situations in order to bring about hope and restoration. I believe in a God of healing who wants us to be made whole again. I believe in a God who isn't afraid to get dirty, who isn't afraid to use the messiness of creation to bring about transformation. So may we turn our eyes upon Jesus. May we embrace hope and begin to be restored. Amen.